Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Reads the Bible. I'm Dalton, and today is part 6 of our Passion Week video study. This brings us to Good Friday. I'm going to take a look at what Jesus went through on this day and what it means for us today, looking ahead. I'm so excited that you guys can join me. Let's get going. Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's house. And it was early morning at this point. And it says, they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, for they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered him, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." But the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the words that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. After reaching a guilty verdict at the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, Jesus is brought here by the chief priests to come before Pilate and have him give Jesus a condemnation of death. Now, traditionally, people have placed Jesus' trial before Pilate at the Antonia Fortress on the northwest corner of the Temple Mount, way up on the other side of Jerusalem. However, it seems more likely that Pilate would have been staying at this area behind me, which would have been Herod the Great's palace in Jerusalem. Now, I know behind me it doesn't look like much right now. You see the old city wall. But the archaeological evidence here suggests that there used to be a gateway that went kind of up here and right in through a couple of steps right there into Herod's palace complex. And it really comes down to whether or not Pilate was a hard military man who would have lived in the barracks with the Roman legion in the Antonia Fortress, or if he was more of a posh politician who would have stayed in the lap of luxury in Jerusalem. Knowing how much Pilate despised Jerusalem, it seems more likely he would have taken Herod the Great's palace for his own. Now, Herod's palace was a massive complex that stretches all the way from the corner of modern-day Jaffa Gate to the end of the old city in the south, and consisted of two main palace structures with a massive courtyard in between. So when it says that the Jews bring Jesus before Pilate, and it says they do not go into the palace, they're probably standing right here in this little area outside of the walls, while Pilate comes and stands right in the middle of the steps, looking down at the Jews who bring before him Jesus. Now, so Pilate comes here and he's like, "What are you guys doing? It is so early in the morning. Who's this?" And they're saying, "This is a criminal. We're bringing him before you." And he's like, "Well, why don't you just deal with it?" And they're like, "Because we need your permission to put him to death." Now, see, this is a very serious charge, where in Rome, anyone looking for a death penalty had to get it from the Roman government. The Jews could not just go and kill Jesus. They needed the permission of Pilate in order to carry out the execution. Now, Pilate does something interesting here, because he takes what the Jews are doing and he brings Jesus up into the palace with him so that he can question him kind of one-on-one. So Pilate called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered him and he says, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did the others say it to you about me?" Pilate basically answers, "Why would I care?" Pilate says, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" And Jesus answers, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." So Jesus starts talking to Pilate about something that's getting a little bit more out there and abstract, where he's claiming to be a spiritual ruler, not just a physical ruler or a rebel rouser or the type of people that Pilate normally would have to deal with. Jesus is coming in saying, I'm not here to challenge the kings of this world. My kingdom's of a different sort. And then Pilate asked him, so you are a king? And Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. And for this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate answers, what is truth? See, Jesus came to proclaim the truth of the gospel, the truth of the kingdom of God, the truth of salvation. Jesus comes to fulfill all of those. And Pilate, being the sort of person he is, just decides to ignore it altogether. What is truth? Who determines what truth is? Pilate approaches it in a different way. Doesn't necessarily accept what Jesus is saying. However, after this, Pilate goes back outside to the priests and says, I have found no guilt in him. There's nothing this man has done that is deserving of death. However, the priests don't like Pilate's answer, that he says that he found no guilt. They start to urge him, saying, this man stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place. Now when Pilate heard that Jesus was from Galilee, and when he learned that he was a Galilean and belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, this would be Herod Antipas, the son of Herod the Great, he decides to send Jesus to Herod because it's Herod's jurisdiction. He's a Galilean. Herod rules over Galilee. Let's let Herod settle it. And Herod, being the son of Herod the Great, probably lived in the other palace complex, the other palace that Pilate wasn't using. Remember, this is a double palace complex. One way up there, one way down there, and this courtyard's kind of in the middle. So Jesus didn't actually have to be taken anywhere to be brought before Herod, at least not that far. And so Herod questions him. He had long desired to see Jesus because he had heard about him and was hoping to see a sign or a miracle done by Jesus. And he questions him at some length, but Jesus makes no reply. And the priests keep bringing accusations against him, but Herod doesn't care. He's not happy that Jesus isn't answering. So eventually, Herod and his guards start to mock Jesus and treat him with contempt. And they array him in splendid clothing and send him back to Pilate. And after this, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other from that very day. For before this, they had been at enmity with each other. Which makes sense. Like, Pilate's now the guy who's technically ruling over Judea, Herod Antipas's father's land. He's living in Herod Antipas's father's palace, and Herod is supposedly the son of Herod the Great, the supposed king of the Jews, but he's left to just the portion of Galilee. But now after this, they start to become friends. So Pilate calls the priests back together and says to them, you have brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. After examining him before you, behold, I do not find this man guilty of any of the charges against him, neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving his death has been done to him. I will therefore punish him and release him. Now when he says he will punish him, he means that he's going to take Jesus and have him flogged. Now, capital punishment, according to the Romans, could either be a form of execution, or it could be a certain number of lashes with a whip that is called the cat of nine tails. It had 9 leather cords upon which was bound rocks, shards of glass, and other sharp objects, so that it would tear the flesh away as it hit the person. Most people, if they were being flogged for a capital punishment level crime, were given 39 lashes. That's 40 minus 1. Because it was believed that the 40th lash would kill a person. Jesus, in this point, they don't say how many lashes he received. It is possible that he received 40, all 40, in an attempt to appease the Jews who want to kill him. If Jesus receives 40 lashes and survives, then he is supposed to continue to live. But Jesus comes back, and Pilate is about to release him after being flogged severely. And the priests come to him and demand that they crucify him. So Pilate devises this plan. It says in the book of Matthew, chapter 27, it says, "At the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner they wanted. At that point, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas, who was an insurrectionist, a rebel rouser, probably the type of person that everyone thought Jesus was going to be. And so when they gathered, Pilate asked them, 'Who do you want me to release for you, Barabbas, the murderer, or Jesus, who is called the Christ?' Because Pilate knew that it was out of envy that the priests had delivered Jesus to him. However, the priests and the elders had stirred up the crowds and persuaded them to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, 'Who do you want me to release to you?' And the crowds replied, 'Barabbas.' Then Pilate asked them, 'Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ?' Notice, Pilate's not dealing with the priests anymore. He's dealing with the crowds of people, the normal Jewish people, who had just a few days earlier, had been worshiping Jesus as he came into Jerusalem. And he asked, 'Then what shall I do with this Jesus who is called Christ?' And the crowds respond, 'Let him be crucified.' And Pilate asks, 'What? Why? What evil has he done?' But they shouted all the more, 'Crucify him.'"
After failing to persuade the crowds, Pontius Pilate took a basin of water and washed his hands in front of them, saying, "My hands are clean of this man's blood." And then he sent Jesus to be crucified. And since Jesus was unable to carry his cross the whole way, having suffered severe injuries from the previous flogging, it says they found a man named Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross for him. And Jesus carried the cross from the palace to a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull.
Now, the Gospels say that Jesus was taken and crucified at a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And in all likelihood, Golgotha is now underneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, visible beneath those two domes, two bluish, grayish domes that you see behind me. Now, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, as nice as it is, doesn't really give you an idea of what it used to look like. So for that, we've come here north of the city to this hillside behind me, where quarrying activity in the past has uncovered a couple natural caves that gave the hill a skull-like appearance. And this is probably very similar to what was happening at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jesus' day. The actual Golgotha was probably a quarry that they were using and then digging tombs in the rock as well, leaving behind these caves that gave it a skull-like appearance, which is why it was called the place of the skull. Now, this hillside used to look a lot more skull-like before modern construction built up around it, erosion eroded some of the features away. But when it was found earlier on, about 100 years ago, but when it was originally found, it looked very skull-like. And so Jesus was brought to a place like this and hung on a cross between two robbers, one on his left and one on his right. And the Gospels say that everyone was hurling insults at him, from the sign that was hung on the cross saying what his crime was, saying Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, mocking this claim, to the people who were hanging beside him, mocking him, saying, "If you were the Son of God, you'd be able to save yourself and us." And the people down below are casting lots, seeing who gets to keep which part of Jesus' clothing, dividing it among themselves like spoils. And from the third hour, which is roughly 9 o'clock, 3 hours after sunrise, to the 6th hour, Jesus is on the cross. At the 6th hour, it says that darkness overtook the land until about the 9th hour. And it was during this period of darkness that Jesus cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which just happens to be the first line of the 22nd Psalm, written by King David 1,000 years earlier, but describing crucifixion in near perfect detail. Saying that they've pierced my hands and feet, I can count each of my bones because they scream in agony. My strength is waning away. They're casting lots for my clothing. And Jesus cries this out, reminding the people of this psalm, while also truly looking up and not seeing the Father there for the first time. Because for the first time in his life, the sin of the world, Jesus is experiencing a separation from God and is no longer able to see his Father. At the 9th hour, it says Jesus let out a loud cry saying, "It is finished," and breathed his last. Now, crucifixion is an excruciating way to die. That's where the word excruciating comes from. You're hanging by your hands and your feet on these poles, and you cannot breathe unless you use all your strength to lift yourself up to breathe out. And then you're stuck again until you can lift yourself up. So when Jesus breathes his last, he literally just gives up and stops trying. Now, normally a crucifixion would last sometimes days, people struggling there, lifting themselves up until they run out of strength to lift themselves up to breathe. But Jesus there dies. And it says that there's an earthquake that shakes the land, and in a hurry, the soldiers who are there watching break the legs of the other two people being crucified, the robbers, so that they can no longer lift themselves up to breathe, so that they would die quicker and get out of there before the earthquake destroys everything. And it says that the temple veil, the curtain that separated the presence of God on earth from mankind, was torn in two from top to bottom, as if God was saying, yes, it is done. It is paid for. I am now free to go amidst my people again.
God took him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. And here, Jesus has paid the price for our sin by paying the ultimate price, his life. And God is able to dwell among his creation again. Now later we see that Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, upon hearing that Jesus was dead, goes to Pilate and requests his body, so that Joseph might bury Jesus in his own tomb.
Now, Joseph's tomb was probably cut from the same quarry that Golgotha, the place of the skull, got its name from. And therefore, it was very close by. And Joseph, being a high member of the Sanhedrin, we learned, planted a garden there, because there's a gardener mentioned later on in the story. And so they brought Jesus' body off of the cross and placed him in Joseph's own tomb, where before they could get him fully prepared for burial, the sun was starting to set before Sabbath, where they weren't allowed to do any work. And so they rolled a stone in front of the tomb and waited until Sunday when they could come back and finish preparing Jesus' body for burial. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and to click on the little bell icon if you'd like to receive notifications of when another video goes up. I want to thank you all for joining me, and I will see you later.